There are people in our lives who never ask us to be anything other than what we are. They just put food on the table and wait. Janis Joplin had one person like that. His name was Seth. Seth Ward Joplin was not a man the world wrote about. He worked as an engineer at Texaco in Port Arthur, Texas, a flat industrial town on the Gulf Coast where the air smelled of refineries and the roads ran straight and wide toward a horizon that never changed. He kept a shelf of books in the front room, Twain, Steinbeck, Whitman, the kind of shelf that said something about a person without their needing to explain it. He was not loud. He was not the kind of father who came to school events and cheered from the bleachers. He was the kind of father who came home, washed his hands, and put dinner on the table. Every night, without exception. Janis Lynn Joplin was born on January 19, 1943, in Port Arthur, the first child of Seth and Dorothy Joplin. From the beginning, she was different, louder, more curious, harder to quiet than the town around her expected. Port Arthur was a place that knew what it wanted from its people: steadiness, conformity, the willingness to blend. Janis did not blend. She painted pictures at a time when girls in Port Arthur were supposed to learn to sew. She asked too many questions in class. She laughed too loudly. She had opinions about things that other children had not yet noticed existed. The town noticed. Children are not kind to the ones who don't fit, and Port Arthur's children were no different. By the time Janis was 10, the cruelty was ordinary, the names called in hallways, the lunch table that was always somehow full. She came home from school with the particular quiet of someone who had spent the day being ground down and had nothing left to say about it. Seth did not ask. He put food on the table. She sat down. They ate. The bullying continued through junior high, through high school, sharpening as it went. At the University of Texas at Austin in 1963, a group of male students nominated Janis for a campus joke contest, The Ugliest Man on Campus. It was printed in the student newspaper. It was meant to be funny. Janis came home to Port Arthur. She didn't tell Seth what had happened. He didn't ask. He put food on the table, and they sat down together. And sometime after the plates were cleared, he reached over and turned on the radio, and a blues record came on. Bessie Smith, the voice that had been in that house since Janis was small. And they sat and listened together, without needing to say anything about why that was the right thing to do. The next morning, she got back in the car and drove to Austin, and then, in the evenings, he read to her. The book he returned to most was Mark Twain's The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, a battered copy with a cracked spine that had clearly been opened hundreds of times before Janis ever heard the first page. He read it the way a man reads something he believes in, slowly, without rushing the good parts, letting the words sit in the air of the room before moving on. Huck Finn's world, the river, the raft, the long, flat American South, the boy who didn't belong anywhere and found his freedom precisely because of it, came into that Port Arthur living room night after night, and Janis lay on the floor and listened. One evening, after Seth had read the chapter where Huck makes his famous choice, the one where he decides to do what he believes is right, even if the world tells him he's wrong, Janis looked up from the floor and asked a question. "Daddy, do you think Huck ever missed home?" Seth set the book on his knee. "I think he missed it every single day. He just couldn't go back." Janis thought about this for a moment. "Is that okay? Missing something you can't go back to? Seth looked at her. That's not missing, Janis. That's carrying. She didn't say anything after that. Seth opened the book again and kept reading. Janis was 12 years old. She would carry that answer for the rest of her life. In the summer of 1960, when Janis was 17, and the leaving was becoming something more serious, not just a trip, but a departure, a beginning, Seth set a paper bag on the kitchen table the morning she was going. Inside, food for the road. And beneath the food, wrapped in a piece of newspaper, his copy of Huckleberry Finn, the battered one, the one he had read from for years. Janis looked at it. She looked at him. Then she asked the question that had been in her for a long time. Daddy, will you be sad when I go? Seth walked to the door. He stood with his hand on the frame, looking at the yard, the flat street, the Gulf Coast sky. He turned back. Every day, he said. Nothing else. Just that. Janis picked up the bag and walked out the door. Through all of it, she called home. From whatever city the tour had brought her to, from whatever hotel room or backstage hallway she was standing in, she called. Seth always picked up. The conversation was never long. He asked if she was eating. She told him what she was working on. He listened. They said goodbye. In the fall of 1970, Janis called home from Los Angeles. Pearl sessions. She was happy, engaged. Her voice was different, steadier, more settled. Seth listened, told her he was glad, asked if she was eating. She laughed, said she was. He said goodbye. 3 weeks later, the phone rang in Port Arthur with a different kind of news. Janis Joplin died on October 4th, 1970. She was 27 years old. In January 1971, Pearl was released. In March of that year, Me and Bobby McGee went to #1. She never heard it on the radio. Seth did. On an ordinary morning in Port Arthur, Texas, in the spring of 1971, Seth Ward Joplin turned on the radio and heard his daughter's voice. She was singing about a road in Louisiana, about freedom, about carrying nothing and everything at the same time. Near the end of the song, her voice shifted. She called out names, said goodbye to them one by one, with the ease of someone who had learned that goodbyes, done right, don't need to be heavy. Seth sat at the kitchen table and listened to the whole thing. And somewhere in that listening, he recognized something. The river. Huck's raft. He had read those pages in this room. He had told a 12-year-old girl that missing something you can't go back to isn't missing. It's carrying. And his daughter had carried it. All the way to a song the whole country was now hearing for the first time. Seth Joplin lived until 1987, 17 years after Janis died. 17 years of sitting at that kitchen table. The world turned Janis Joplin into a legend. Seth Joplin never sat across from a legend. He sat across from his daughter. There are people in our lives who never ask us to be anything other than what we are. They just put food on the table and wait. Seth waited every day for 17 years after she was gone. And the river kept moving.